5, I'm going to call to order the Tri-County Technical Advisory Committee meeting, Friday, April 20, 2018. I'm Brendan Ferry from El Dorado County, and
this is Zach Wood with Alpine.
And Chuck Beatty emailed in this morning from Amador and said he's sick today, so he won't be joining us, but we do have a quorum, 2 out of 3, so we'll go ahead and hold the meeting. Let's see. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda? Are there any changes to the agenda?
I don't have any.
Okay. Do we care to approve the agenda?
I'll move to approve.
No second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Agenda's approved. Correspondence, item C. Any correspondence from you? Matters that aren't on the agenda? Or
No, I think we just had a comment letter on the mitigation item.
Yeah, I received a comment from Sandy on item 2. I thought I'd just talk about that then.
Okay.
I don't think we really need to vote on that one, do we?
No.
Yeah. Okay, item D, minutes from the September 8th, 2017 meeting. We had a problem with the video, and we don't have the minutes from that meeting yet, so we're going to continue that item to next month.
The video's fine.
Video's
like
fine.
I said,
I misspoke. It's too long.
It'll shorten our meetings. Okay.
So we're going to continue item D. Okay, let's move to item E. This is public matters, information items, and persons wishing to address the committee regarding any item that is not on the agenda today. Anyone have any other items they'd like to discuss? How about anyone on the web conference?
No one on.
Okay. Anyone on the phone? No one on the
Yes, I'm on the phone.
Okay. Any items you'd like to address that aren't on the agenda?
No, not today, thank you.
Okay. All right, moving right along. Let's go to our agenda items for the day. We'll start off with item 1. This is a review and possible approval of a tree removal request. The applicant is Mr. Frey, Lot 35 of Kirkwood Meadows, Unit 1, APN 026-172008. I believe there were 4 trees recommended by a forester on this vacant parcel that were either dead or dying. And he recommended removal. So Chuck's not here for this item. I believe Chuck said typically these are just approved if they have a letter from a forester. So.
Yeah, I don't have any comments. I think this is what we expect from these tree removal applications, and Steve Cannon's pretty familiar with the forest here in Kirkwood, so I'm comfortable with approving the tree permit.
I'm comfortable as well. Any public comment on this issue? Okay, seeing none. Care to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll move to approve the tree removal permit for Frey, Lot 35, Kirkwood Meadows.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approved. All right, item 1 done. Item 2, review and possible acceptance of the 2016-2017 street sweeping report submitted in October 2017 for compliance with Kirkwood Specific Plan Mitigation Measure 4.2V, COA 50. The applicant is Kirkwood Mountain Resort. So we did have a submittal on this item. It's in the packet for those who are interested. Basically, some man hours from October 17th, 18th, 19th for sweeping, and some photos. So I did get a comment via email on this item from Sandy Sloan. Her comment was KMR is responsible to sweep all of the streets in Kirkwood, and she did not see that evidence in the photo documentation. Do you want to talk about that at all, or?
Yeah, I mean, if there's any more information to add about the sweeping, either from the applicant or anyone else, I think we can do that and then deliberate.
Yeah. Can anyone provide more detail on that?
Yeah, maybe, between me and Andrew might actually have a better explanation, but...
That'd be great.
So Doug Ferrani, I'm the general manager at the resort. And this was gone through last year with a specific plan, and it was determined that we're not responsible for any private roads in Kirkwood.
Do you remember where it was? Was it determined at a hearing here, or
This went to the...
Amador County.
Amador County Board?
Yeah.
Okay. When did you say that was? I'm sorry.
When the specific plan update was reviewed and acted on,
Okay.
Ian Jackson, Chuck could give you the exact date. It seemed to me it was in the summertime.
Or early fall, September.
Okay.
But that's in the minutes from that meeting.
Okay. And yeah, it's too bad Chuck isn't here to help confirm that. Do you have recollection on that one?
What I know is that there's kind of two different points of information now because of the actions that the counties took on the tenure review. In Amador, the Planning Commission was more specific about the sweeping mitigation item and, if you will, coming to a determination about responsibility, which they incorporated into their action. In Alpine, I know that we were less specific and we didn't have any assignment of a interpretation of the mitigation from our decision makers. They basically deferred it back to staff. So that's I think the difference between the actions that Amador took and Alpine took on the tenure review. And specifically, sweeping was one of the mitigation topics that there was disagreement about the compliance. So.
Okay.
So now you're here, Brendan, to...
Well, these streets aren't in El Dorado County. It sounds like Amador agreed that just essentially the main streets needed to be swept, is what I'm hearing. And then,
I believe that's true, and especially because of Lynn Morgan, especially because we relinquished, the KMA streets to KMA.
Only half of it. Only half of it.
Only half?
Yeah, only the west side, the east side.
Oh, well, that's not in Amador
That
County.
was no, it's still in Amador.
Oh, it is,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So Bertrand Peru, I'm actually part of the KMA board and I'm actually in charge of the road, and I'd like to make a comment. Yes, historically, it has been interpreted that KMR, whatever, the resort, was actually in charge of the mitigation measures. So they create the traffic to the valley and they would basically be responsible for sweeping all the road. Actually, personally, I'm totally comfortable with Vel only being responsible of the road that are actually used by the people coming in the valley. But I think I need clarification on our private road and driveways, we should not be subjected to the same requirement. The traffic coming, the ski traffic is not coming on our road. We don't have the same usage. We don't have the same need for sweeping. Actually, in the past, I have seen at the time KMR was doing all the road, and so basically they were sweeping KMD, Kirkwood Meadow Drive. It was very dirty, and our road was totally clean before they come and brush our street with a dirty brush, and then we are totally smeared. So what I want to say is we should clearly distinguish private road and driveways versus public road. And personally, I'm comfortable with Vel being just responsible of the road that are being accessed by the skiers, and which would make sense within the mitigation measure. It's not what was done historically. I mean, historically, and I probably have photos actually of showing the sweeper on KMA Road and East Meadow Road. I don't have photos, but I'm sure Sandy has documentation. And that's where we are. And I understand at one supervisor meeting not too long ago, under the impression that KMA has regained control, ownership of all of its roads, which was not the case. It was only the west side of KMD. The east side of KMD was always been owned by KMA, and that was also in the past swept by the resort. So anyway, at this stage, we do maintain our road, we snowplow it, we maintain it. I would be fine to be actually supervising as well need for road sweeping. I just don't want to be held to a calendar. The reason being is our road doesn't need most of the time sweeping, except when there was a huge storm like last summer, where we had a lot of things falling up from the hill on the road, and that would be the perfect time to do sweeping if we had to. And so I would like to hear some flexibility to the homeowner association to maintain their own road. If we agree that Bell is only responsible of the public road.
I just wanted to get some info for clarification, which is when Amador County abandoned the maintenance responsibility for a portion of Kirkwood Meadows Drive and the subdivision roads within KMA that were county maintained. Am I framing that right? Which is some of the subdivision roads, like you described, Bertrand, is you had some roads that were not, or just for KM Drive.
Yes.
A portion of KM Drive was only KMA easement, and a portion was county. And now the county's abandoned.
It was only the parking
Okay.
easement. It was only the parking easement.
Okay.
Then KMR has been granted the deal on KMD. I don't remember the exact date, but 1988 or something like that. I mean, a long, long time ago.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to picture that because the segments of Kirkwood Meadows Drive, whether they're in easement or county maintained or privately,
Yeah.
I think the sweeping doesn't recognize, or at least its intent is to sweep the whole of the facility and not stop at some arbitrary line. So my understanding is that was one of the discussions that was new information from the analysis and the actions in the 2003 plan, because at that time, like you described, the maintenance responsibilities were different, and that changed only in the last 3 or 4 years that Amador took that action. So thank you.
So how can we better clarify, these roles and responsibilities, requirements? It seems like there's some gray here that could be better clarified. I don't know. I mean, I'm not suggesting we're going to amend the specific plan or probably even the mitigation measures, but if there can be some other guidance document, something that's so it's just clear, so we can next year when we're here reviewing the same thing, we'll all have a better understanding of what the expectation is and that it was met or not. Like
Yeah.
a ownership map of the valley with, I'm not sure.
I think one of the things that's not in the mitigation is we're requiring one party, which is identified in the MMP, to provide the reporting. So this is our information year after year, and the other parties that may have an interest in doing sweeping, the staff's never been active in reaching out to the HOAs or other parties and saying, hey, can you tell us what kind of sweeping you've been doing? Whether that's required by the mitigation or it's, I think it's better information to include for that topic to say, each year we come in, we talk about the sweeping, and I think some of the info that TriTac should have and we can facilitate acquiring it would be and we'll talk about some of these stormwater things, is there was an exceptional storm event, and there was a cleanup that took place, and perhaps the HOA rolled the sweeper out. And I think that would just be as simple as taking notes on that description versus our standard here, which is we need some photographic evidence and we need to see invoices to kind of make that determination. Just to round out that information about who's doing what or who's responsible for what, because we could start with, like you described, Brendan, hey, let's look at the property ownership and let's kind of go through this point by point, which I think might be a little excessive, but I think it'd be comfortable enough as we get to this coming October, which is when we would normally get this report and when we normally have the need to do the final sweep, that we could get ready for this item just by saying, hey, we've contacted the district and the bigger HOAs and asked them if they had any more information about their sweeping activities for that year. So that would just provide some more information. I don't think, I'm trying to suggest that we need to take that info and then say, hey, you stopped your sweeper at the end of that street, which means that you're not in compliance or something. It just would be a starting point, especially since we're not in the valley as often to just have this innate knowledge of what the activities are. So that's a bit of what I think we had to do at Alpine, because we didn't directly resolve the matter with the actions that we took on the 10-year review. So
Yeah.
a working solution is sort of where we have to start.
Yeah, it sounds that way. Any other thoughts on this one?
Yes, so what I'm hearing is Val is going to continue to report on KMD and public road of the valley, and HOA still can handle their roads the way they are used to. Is that what correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
And it sounds like would there be some way to take note of that, when sweeping?
Well, actually, we could document the state of the road. Actually, I can do that this year just to have a sense of what the need is, because, as I say, I don't think the need is going to be event-driven, not calendar-driven. I don't think we need to do it at the end of the season. You could go check our road is totally clean now.
Yeah.
But if there is a big storm in August or in July, then that's where we would need to do it, I think.
Yeah, okay.
And so I try to document this year. I take picture every month or something like that based on events, and then we can discuss later on.
If you want to provide that for next year's discussion, all right, I think that works.
Yeah,
Some of these roads, frankly, can't be swept, I don't think, the condition they're in. We have some roads like that in our county.
I agree, and again, when do we get that kind of consolidated and as TriTac say, hey, we've kind of taken sweeping and given it a little bit more thought, so here's a list of road segments that shouldn't be swept for the purposes of the mitigation, or getting more detailed documenting, because we're really just talking about one area of responsibility in KMA, half a dozen condominium projects with different ownership and responsibility, whether it's for their parking or access drives. If we need to, I think we can do that, but in the meantime, I think taking just a few points of reference for the next mitigation report would be a way to start, which is for Alpine, take some photos about the same time of the year in October of the parking lots, Cornice Court, places like that, just so that we have that information. And again, I think as staff, that's easy to do ourselves and not have to burden any property manager or someone to say, hey, send us that photo. I need a picture on October 31 of what your streets look like.
Okay, I think I'm comfortable with the explanation of, the Amador County Board's recommendation to the resort to only sweep the mains. It sounds like Alpine didn't take an action, so that means, they really didn't provide great direction one way or the other. So I guess I'm comfortable with the report as submitted to satisfy the mitigation measure, and then we'll continue to follow up, with the HOAs and maybe the district and others with supplemental documentation next year. And I think we should maybe talk about this a little more, offline, just to get a handle on expectations. If we want to inventory things, or like you said, hit a couple photo points every year just for some type of photo monitoring documentation. It's interesting because the mitigation measure doesn't really talk about effectiveness, material capture, things like that. It's just a frequency-based measure. That's it. It doesn't say do a great job. It just says do it twice a year. So pretty simple, straightforward, kind of old school, but that's what we're working with. So I think I'm comfortable moving this one forward myself.
Yeah, I'm ready to accept the mitigation.
Okay. That's your motion?
Yeah, I think, do we have the sweeping and the avalanche separate?
We have them separate.
Okay, yeah, I'll move to accept the 16-17 street sweeping report.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, item 2 approved. Let's go on to item 3. This is also, I'll just read it here. Review and possible acceptance of the 2016-17 Avalanche Forecasting and Control Program submitted in October 2017 for compliance with Kirkwood Specific Plan Mitigation Measure 4.1 AE COA 32 applicant KMR. So this again is a mitigation measure annual submittal on the avalanche forecasting. Any discussion from you on this one, Zach?
No, I don't know if there's any other info or comment that we want to take to fill this out.
Yeah, do you want to supplement this at all, Doug or Andrew, or comfortable with it as submitted? Any public comment on this item? No one? Okay.
Okay, I will move to accept the 2016 and 2017 avalanche forecasting and control mitigation report.
Can I just ask one question before we
Yeah,
do
go
that?
ahead.
On the report, it says 2015-16. Does this look a year back? Obviously, we can't.
So this was...
Or was the date
Our
not
timing's
changed?
off.
Or-
No, I think that's right. No,
The last winter, I think, is what.
this was submitted in October.
So
Yeah,
it could cover the
or
16-17
16,
season.
17, not,
It was,
That's right.
I think that's just a.
I think it's a date. So we might want to correct that for the official records. I don't think we need a... Can we just approve this and get a submittal after the fact with the correct date on it?
Yes,
I think.
Yeah.
reflect that in the minutes.
Yeah, we'll reflect that in the minutes, that it looks like there needs to be a date change, but I'm assuming the data in the report, because it does talk about 16-17 within the document, that it looks like the data is accurate. In other words, the 494 inches of snow, 25 missions with 416 rounds fired, etc., is accurate. It's just the date at the top.
Yeah, that, I remember that amount of bullets.
It's a good number of bullets.
A lot of bullets left.
And if you look on the transmittal, what page is that?
Yeah, it's accurate there.
I think we've got the right date on it.
Yep. Okay, we'll go ahead and just,
I've got to add a comment, and this is probably not going to line up well because now I'm thrown off because we got this in the fall for the previous year. I know that when we were kind of responding or looking at the avalanche incidents which occurred in the 17 winter that impacted some of the homes on East Meadows, when I looked at the specific plan's avalanche runout information, and tried to correlate that with where some of these properties were, I just kind of thought, how is the stuff that we planned on, that we got our report based on, comparing to what we experienced in the 17 winter, and most of the runouts are actually on the resort property in the ski resort, so I don't know if there was any, and I might be going too far back, which is, was there any discussion operationally of, hey, we're having different or more exceptional avalanche patterns than we usually do or are on the map? Because I think when you look at East Meadows, you'd say, yes, we've not experienced avalanche to that degree, but the resort's a little different because it's controlled differently. So I was just curious.
So you're asking if that should have been in the report? Or
No, just if that was something that the resort recognized, saying, hey, there was avalanche conditions or avalanche activity that was kind of abnormal, not just the kind of simple metrics of how many days do we do control or something, but that would have been similar to, again, the East Meadows, which is, hey, we didn't kind of forecast that happening. So that just made me think of the information we start with these plans, which is really a mathematical equation that describes where the runout is and what the impacts are in those zones. So my understanding is the resort didn't have any exceptional things that happened during that year, which might just speak to this all being effective. But a lot of times you don't know, because during control the public's not up there and we don't know if something on the mountain was, wow, that's never happened before. So I think you see when things like this are happening, what they result in is really bad circumstances, whether it's villages in Europe that get buried by snow and things like that, just good to know in case that's been discussed. So don't want to look at those maps too closely, they'll hurt your eyes.
Any other comment on this item? Okay, I think, do you want to amend your motion to just note the date change, or?
Yeah, same motion to approve the forecasting report, avalanche forecasting report, and we'll request that we get the date revised on the header.
Get a new submittal. Okay, for the records. Good. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Approved. Item 3. Okay, we have 2 discussion items coming up here. Let's move to item 4. This is a discussion of peak winter traffic and parking issues and possible next steps. And I guess that's a pretty open agenda item, but we always think it's fruitful at the end of the season, especially after the March we just had and how difficult it was to get here. I can note from personal experience from South Lake Tahoe to discuss winter traffic, parking issues, those kind of things, to see if there were noted failures in the system, deficiencies, improvements that can be made. We talked about this quite a bit last year too, I remember. And I guess I'll just open it up. Do you want to kick off anything, or should we?
No, I think this kind of was generated by experience that we shared just as observing conditions at Kirkwood in our free time. And then there's a lot of other information you gather, whether it's based off of the web or from people you meet on the street. And I think what we usually do in talking about parking is just focus on our parking report, how many cars were parked. Usually in the past we kind of just, we kind of recognize we have a initial high demand day because of pent up demand, skier demand to ski the conditions at Kirkwood, or employees that are kind of getting up to speed on snow removal. So we're pretty familiar with the usual things that we talk about when we talk about the peak days and the circumstances surrounding those, but I think the reason that we just had this item is it seemed like this winter, specifically late winter, there were some days that were exceptional, even in our experience here. So the purpose of the discussion is to just get more information about that broadly, not just related to the parking counts or the raw data, and just open up that discussion, because I think it does involve some of the TriTac responsibilities, whether it's parking or talking about what we need to perhaps do at the intersection of Kirkwood Meadows Drive and 88. But I wasn't here those days. Maybe Brendan was, and I think that's what we wanted to start having that discussion about, is filling in the gaps of the information that we have. So, yeah, no real, I don't think we need to get from A to B necessarily. Just want to have
Yeah.
that discussion open so that the community can provide input, or anyone.
Yeah, there were a couple days. I've lived here since 2000 and have been coming out here since then. And in March there were some very exceptional days of leave South Lake Tahoe at 7:45 and actually get turned around and not able to get into the resort, just because of demand. And I think maybe the reason was the winter was so terrible leading up to that there were no powder days, and that was the only chance to get it, and so everyone was on it. And it wasn't just here, it was Heavenly too, and I'm sure every other resort in California. And maybe that's just part of it, was the unique setup of the storms this winter. I don't know, but let's see. Doug or Andrew, do you want to comment at all on this one?
I mean, I can make a few general comments. And
Okay.
If there's questions, I can address those.
That would be great.
Yeah, we saw it too. It was tough those couple days. It was really hard to have to turn people away when they come all the way out, and we just didn't have enough parking. And I think it's a combination of things between, you mentioned it, it's the perfect storm of events. We didn't have a lot of snow, then we had a lot of snow, and a sunny powder day on a weekend at Kirkwood is pretty much always going to park out. And in some of those cases, it was in a very big way, with a lot of people turned around.
Yeah.
In addition to that, we have lost parking over the years. Over the last decade, there's a number of spots we've lost for various reasons. Some because we should have never been parking there in the first place, and I'm sure Rick can attest to that. And then in other regards, it was due to whether it was development or a new powerhouse, or the asphalt grindings that we had to deal with. We've lost parking due to that because we're more restricted on where we can put snow. And then, Fremont and Merrill going to the county, going from the county to private ownership, we're no longer allowed to park on the side of those roads. Or there's so many little things like that added up, and we have lost parking over the years. But that's part of the issue, and that might be something we need to talk about further into the future about, because we have certain areas that are zoned for parking right now that we could potentially look at, and we're looking hard at where we could potentially add more parking, but there's other areas that are not zoned for parking. We ran into that with the school site, with the developer trying to put a parking lot there for some parking replacement that has to happen, but that didn't go forward. And but maybe that's the kind of thing we need to relook at in the future. So that's part of it. The other issue, which adds to the problem, is the amount of time it takes to get people into the valley. We have one way in and out, and I think, Zach, you might have mentioned the intersection out there, or do we need to look at that better? We tried some different things this year. It's hard when there's one way in or out. It takes a while to get everyone into the valley and park. But still, we run into that limitation of how much parking we actually have in the end. So it was a big challenge this year. And one of the things we're really looking at is we can't control how much parking we have in the short term, but maybe we can do a better job with communication around letting people know before they leave South Lake, hey, there's a good chance you're not going to make it in. We worked with Caltrans a bit on that. Caltrans helped us out a little with their electronic sign. We did some stuff on social media. We have a bunch of ideas that we're looking at this year to try to be more helpful to guests before they make the trip out.
Yeah, can you push that out on text, mass text message?
That's one of the things on the list.
That's I I think that's a huge tool that should be better utilized, absolutely. How serious would you say you are at really taking on and creating additional parking? Is that a huge need that you see that you're really going to jump on?
Yeah, and it's not like we're looking to add 1,000 more spots. We're
Yeah.
just trying to get back to maybe where we were 10 years ago.
Yeah, and we have that data, right? We have total number of spots
Yeah.
in the plan.
I would like to ask the resort, which is when I hear about these peak parking days, I hear about the unique parking, or at least I feel like I experienced it firsthand. Parking at the maintenance facility here on Loop Road for the first time in the time I've been around, or hearing that at the cow camp at Capel's Maintenance that there's off-site parking happening there on these peak days. And these are all things that I don't think are well reflected in our mitigation reports to date, because we kind of have half a dozen or maybe 10 parking areas that we always count: Red Cliffs, Mighty Mountain, Lower 7. But I think really kind of refining the parking counts for these niche areas, whether it's in the subdivision or wherever you can fit a car, basically. I don't think we want to year over year count those necessarily, because it can be really, I think it's going to be difficult because those operations are really fluid. But we've got to document that people are parking at these distances from the resort basically as day skier parking, and we just have never kind of considered them, because up until this year that was a more rare occurrence than just once a season. So we probably didn't have it on our radar screen. This year I'm thinking, how many days was Schneider Cow Camp used? That's going to be information that we should probably be looking at TriTac in the future. So if you want to fill in that, I'm not so interested in saying, hey, I'm going to write down exactly how many days and how many cars, but that's what we should be doing for the future.
So just to address that Schneider camp, that's used very rarely, and it's been probably, last year was used once or twice, this year it was used once or twice. It's not used very often at all. So
Sure.
That hasn't really changed.
And we're talking about the same peak days like March 4, that would have been a cow camp parking day as well. Okay.
Probably. No, not March 4th. I don't think. Who was that? I'm trying to remember the big crazy day. Were you in the...
Yeah, it was the weekend. Well, my birthday was the 9th. I know I was here. That was a Friday. It was the weekend after that.
Martin Luther King.
Yeah. It was just extreme. It would have been the 17th, 18th?
March. You're talking March or January?
March.
March.
Sorry, I was talking March, yeah. I think MLK was probably bad too, but that's pretty standard.
Yeah, I don't have Schneider camp.
There was one on 224 as well.
224?
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, that's like the perfect storm of events forced that issue out there. But we're trying to address more than anything is the normal peak day.
Yes.
Not so
Yeah.
much the blowout days. There's not
I
a lot
agree
to
with
do
that.
with any resort on
You
those
can't,
days.
we do our business the same way. You can't ever meet peak of peak. It's
Yeah.
just like traffic in Myers. We're just never going to get there to carry that capacity on that exceptional Sunday.
It's like going to church for Easter Sunday.
Yeah, you just can't do that. And I totally get that, and I respect that and agree with that 100%. Better tools, yeah. Education of staff, communication. I think getting back up to parking capacity is something that's worth looking at, and we'd certainly be involved in that with zoning issues and other things. The school site was an interesting discussion, and so we did get a little finger on the pulse of how potentially changing some zoning might not be favorable. So we should just make sure we think about that carefully, I think, as we move that forward. Were there issues with folks parking illegally in subdivisions?
We had some.
You had some, but it's not a major
On the weekdays, yeah.
not a major concern, though, it sounds like.
I'm going to put bigger signs this year, try to discourage such, how do you call it, wild parking, because we are on the parking pad on Merrill and the parking pad on Fremont, the first one. We had people, after the valley was full, that actually came to our parking pad. And so I don't know if a resort can help us on that situation. I mean, in the past, you were blocking with cones the street so people would not go there, and that would be appreciated. You know. So that would be a one way. I'm going to put bigger signs this year, but
Okay.
unless there is enforcement, it goes so much. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the parking you described, there wasn't ticketed or towing happening for the illegal parking that you just described, day skiers within KMA.
Yes, but it's been another issue.
The cases this year, though, were any of those vehicles like enforced on, whether it was a tow or a ticket? They were just there and they made things hard on the
So they are-
homeowners.
They got away with it.
This year, yes, they got away with it. We have stickers now that are pretty difficult to peel as a
Oh, okay.
discouragement.
Got it.
But we have no. I mean, the towing is a more legal situation that
Sure.
we need to be careful with. So far we have not, but we are looking at our option for that. But
Okay.
as I said, if the resort could come on our street just to reduce the impetus for people to check this area for parking, that'd be actually appreciated. Yeah.
Okay.
The other issue I'd like to discuss, how many, maybe Doug can tell us, how many days of parking on KMD did we have this year?
Oh, I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah,
Well,
last year
submit
was
our-
about 14. This year, 6, 7, I would say.
We'll submit our mitigation requirements
Okay.
for parking numbers, definitely when we get all the numbers together.
Yeah.
Then you can get
So
some
the
information from that.
issue
All right.
with that point is we are basically on our easement on the west side, on the east side of Kirkwood Meadow Drive. Basically, the language says that if there is 2 years in a row more than 5 days of parking on the east side of KMD, then the resort should look at expanding the valley capacity. And so that's something we actually would love to see happening because and personally I'm not managing this business indeed, but the situation of parking is terrible. I mean, people have to walk a mile with their ski boots and skis to reach the thing. So having more parking in the central area seems to be critical for the quality of experience in Kirkwood. And the idea of, I think the idea of using KMD for extra buffer for the special occasions, that would be the purpose of this language in the easement. But the resort should increase capacity in the valley, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm talking for KMA, but East Meadow thinks the same thing, and I'm sure a lot of HOA think the same thing. That would improve the quality of experience for homeowners and to stay skiers. And your bottom line, because this is your bottom line.
Thank you.
So I'm just
Lynn?
curious how many days you actually had to turn people away because of parking? Do you know?
It wasn't that many.
Four?
It probably feels like a lot more because the days where we did were pretty bad.
Yeah.
But it really wasn't that many in the big scheme of things. And we'll,
Okay.
again, when we submit that, we'll have a better idea where we are with that. But
Okay.
it was, yeah, not many.
You used the message sign at Highway 88 and State Line. I don't know if it was turned on in Myers as well, twice.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there was a learning curve this season because the actions that you described, the communications actions, Brendan, you kind of had to adjust to those based on the circumstances. So
It seems like it'd be good to put it on the electronic sign that's on Highway 88 and Mount Zion Road also, just outside of Pine Grove.
Yeah,
got it.
Yeah,
that would be really helpful.
yeah.
Yeah, and that, Caltrans has been pretty good at working with us on that.
Good.
It's kind of up to them on that day if they want to help us or not.
Right.
Generally, they've been pretty helpful, but we're just working on that relationship, trying to do better there. So.
Okay.
I think that's a great one to always
Yeah.
stay on top of. We manage our Caltrans relationship carefully, diligently, and in as many ways as possible. Because they are the big gorilla, and they're constantly evolving. So definitely encourage that relationship.
One other note about those days when we do park out, which are fewer than we think. But the other messaging that we try to do is around noon, people are exiting and parking opens up again.
Uh-huh.
So the skiers that are turned around, the better we can educate them to try again, come back midday and you're probably going to get in.
Yeah.
'Cause
First
people are-
start that day.
Yeah,
Start later.
yeah.
Yeah.
Either come really early or
Wait till the middle of the day.
middle of the day.
Right. Less fresh powder then, but
True.
the way it gets cut up these days, it's about the same. It doesn't matter anymore.
Sometimes the backside is tied to that opening.
True. So get some Eagle Bowl, yeah.
Work in your favor.
True.
Like skiing during storms, there you go.
Yep. Is there any sense, how do you, this is maybe a hard one to answer, but how do you think communication went with, new employee training's always challenging with seasonal type positions, so do you feel like you're doing a really good job with your parking attendants and your snowplow drivers to get as many spaces open as fast as possible and to get cars parking? I just hate showing up, and I'm not saying I saw it here at the resort, and cars are, you just see a lot of hidden spots that are just not quite big enough. And I'm not saying I saw that here, but I see it at Heavenly sometimes. And it's hard when there's snow on the ground. You don't see the lines. Not that there's really lines here, but that happens at Cal Base a lot. Do you have a sense of how well your program's established for doing that training?
I have a pretty good sense of that, yeah. And can we do better? Yes, we can always do better. I will say there were days that team did an amazing job of getting quite a few people in on those days when we parked out. We still parked really well, really efficiently. Can we do better? Yeah. And is it happening consistently? Probably not. It is a challenging staff, seasonal, transient staff. They're
tough.
changing during the season too, and trying to keep everyone working as perfectly as they can. It doesn't always happen, but yeah, it's very high on our radar to keep addressing that as best we can.
I think that's really important, just to acknowledge that year to year with the guys that do come back or gals that do come back, how critical that is, that training for not only plowing but parking management is just huge.
Yep, agreed.
Anyone else have comments on this issue?
Brett,
Yes, go ahead on the phone.
Brandon,
Yes.
hi, this is Nancy Trevette from the West Side.
Hi.
Just to follow up with what you were just asking about, there was a weekend, a high-volume weekend, where on Wintergreen, which pours out onto Kirkwood Meadows Drive, and the parking was, it was like snug on both sides of Wintergreen, and the type of vehicles that were parked there were high, they were high up. So it became very difficult to be able to get from Wintergreen into Kirkwood Meadows Drive. And I shared this experience with Brian Bigsley from the resort, and I think he tried to address it the succeeding days or succeeding times. But, yeah, it just became the kind of thing where we just shut our eyes and just gunned it to get out on Kirkwood Meadows Drive and hope that nobody was coming in either direction.
Mm-hmm.
So efficiency is great, but being careful of the type of vehicles that are parked down there by Chicken Feathers and Wintergreen is really key. Another time we saw the resort put in porta potties, which was welcomed. The only comment regarding that is it would have been nice to have them more forced looking versus the big blue. I thought it was a construction site when I first arrived outside and saw that. And then the other thing that I know the resort tries to address this also is just the lack of common sense of people when they do park on Kirkwood Meadows Drive. They just forget that it's a roadway, and even if a vehicle is only going slowly, there's still the possibility that if they take the wrong step, that they could get bumped or hit or fall If there's some way for the resort to be able to help educate their guests that it's not just that it's a shared roadway, but the resort is trying to address their issues. But like Doug said, there's always room for improvement.
Okay. Thank you very much for those comments. It sounds like it was a line of sight issue at that intersection where you couldn't see properly. So it sounds like that one might have gotten addressed with Brian, but I don't know long term how you control something like that, or I'm not sure.
That's on the part of the staff. Maybe when we get close to the intersection there, let's look for.
Leave it back.
Yeah.
So that was addressed. I remember Nancy's comment to Brian, and we talked about it, and he did try to address that. You always run into the problem of people coming in late and trying to park creatively
Sneak in,
when
yeah.
there's no employees around, but we definitely recognize what Nancy was saying, and we're doing our best to mitigate that. So.
Okay. That makes good sense. And
That was the original parking issue going back to whenever I felt like I went to my first TriTac meeting and we really had to deal with parking. It was that longer wheelbase vehicles on KM Drive midwinter were creating the real headache for the volunteers. And we would have that discussion here about, boy, we were down to one lane, we don't like this public safety situation, and the root cause was, so here's a big truck or SUV, they can't be turned around, they have to park if we're in 9 a.m. parking mode, and tough solutions. So yeah, I think if there's some flexibility to handle that, that's okay, but we'll probably for the future be seeing scenarios where a big vehicle or a tall vehicle gets parked at any intersection, Palisades, across the valley, and that's, it's not ideal. And we would probably be able to control that if it was just nice, simple paved parking. I know that we made lots of comments about the intersection sight distance when we reviewed the initial KM Drive shoulder parking improvement, and that would have been a solution, but without real strong street edge and improvements, I think you're going to get the creative parking. So
yeah, you're definitely going to do that. I'm not going to say I haven't ever done that as a wee one.
You're the one.
Yeah, it might be.
But
Beat up
I just
road.
wanted to note that the discussion about parking has shifted a bit, because I'm glad that we aren't talking about concerns from public safety officials about, hey, we didn't have enough room and we had real problems, and this is kind of it still needs to be addressed, but I think it's at a level lower, which is to be turned away from the resort and still have a safe day is better than these other situations.
That's a good
So,
point.
it's something I wanted to recognize.
It's a great point.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, the same line, actually, to improve the efficiency of the parking, if the longer vehicle could be channeled to a specific parking lot, because otherwise, either they stick on KMD or they take two slots, because they go in diagonal, in angle. So I've seen that many times. I'm just above KMD, so I have a lot of time to contemplate that. So, and they take two spots instead of one. So if that'd be one suggestion. If you had a specific parking lot for longer vehicles, then you could put probably more people along KMD.
Sure. Yeah, and if there's creative solutions that the resort implements and they work, I think it's what we want to hear is the results of things that are different and work. But I think the more we talk about managing the parking or micromanaging it, just each interaction slows things down on getting people into the valley, and now the focus of what generated this discussion, I think, is we don't want to have a highway as a parking lot. So actually the faster we get people in here, even if they get bottlenecked and it's kind of a mess, that's probably a better solution to the highway problem. So it's complex. But I think we did a good job getting this conversation started, because we typically go outside of that mitigation box every time we discuss parking and the mitigation. So I think being able to have this broader conversation around the parking efficiency, the traffic flow on the highway is what we'll probably be doing in the future, because whether it happens in March or February or January, I think the increase in day skier visits on the weekends is kind of the trend. So we need to prepare to address that.
Yeah, the highway flow issue is a huge one too. It's a little separate, but I don't know if at some future meeting we do want to have a Caltrans rep here, or even CHP to be part of the discussion on solutions they may see too. You know, that's not a bad idea, I don't think. That could be a future agenda topic. Any other comments on this item? This was just a discussion. We did indicate possible next steps. I don't know, did we identify any? Maybe the CHP Caltrans issue is one, but I don't know if there are any concrete ones. We can certainly look at the mitigation measure parking report and probably talk more about it.
I'd like to see the report just enhanced with the information that relates to, right now I think we have the triggers, which is the 5 days Bertrand mentioned. It's backing this up to, I think, include these other parking areas, whether it's the corrals, the cow camp, the maintenance area, so that even if we just know that they were used and how many days they were used, to give us a picture of the parking scenario on any given week. Because usually a winter doesn't happen where we're here at the end of resort operations going back and analyzing what I think is more often, despite your birthday, Brendan, is we're going to have a TriTac meeting the weekend after the big, first Bluebird Powder Day, and it's all fresh in our minds, so we go, oh man, I didn't like this, or this was bad, and we're dealing with it in the middle of the season, trying to talk about solutions or resolve things. So when that happens in the future, I think it'd just be better to know, hey, if Doug's here, did he describe that they used the parking at the cross-country center that day? And now when we look at the report in the future, we'll all have the same information, which is, yep, they checked the box, they used cross-country, or they used the cow camp. Because that, I think, can help normalize some of the real complexities, whether the spur was closed, whether there was, one of the pieces of equipment went down, things that we usually don't record in this is why there was 2,000 or 2,500 parking vehicles parked that day. So that's my request, which is to kind of enhance the parking report with this additional information about whatever you can provide from the pedestal sign and the intersection out into Highway 88, because I think we should recognize it as rare now, but in the future, if there's a trend from 1 to 2 days a season to 3 to 4, we'll start to know that that things are, what to do. So that's my only comment there. When we get the actual report, I think we should discuss that in detail, and if there's more comments or we need to see some revisions to it, let's do it at that time. So
That sounds good. Okay. All right, I think let's move on from item 4 to another discussion item, item 5. This is a discussion of stormwater system maintenance and a possible site visit, and I know Zach has some photos that he'd like to show us on the screen over here.
Yeah, I'll hand this stuff out real fast, just so in case we talk about it anywhere specific, you kind of know what's around. I got a bigger map here too. I think we just initially wanted to talk about stormwater because it came up during a mitigation discussion, and we were talking specifically about Sentinel's Way or something, and I've noticed just in the last 2 years that whether it's debris flows that have happened in the East Meadows or stormwater impacts to the Timber Creek Townhome project, that there's so many different people involved in the stormwater management here, particularly lots of the HOAs, that we just don't have a starting point to discuss some of the issues, and I think the main one that comes up is, or was really revealed when we did the site visits on the asphalt remediation. Hey, what can we do here? What can we do in this drainage? Are we doing maintenance? Is this a project? All the things that kind of relate to managing a stormwater system, which I think in your experience, Brendan, is usually an agency responsibility, whether it's the city in the basin, whether it's the County of El Dorado. But here we have, we just have that different situation. So, if we want to go out and look at anything today, I think we can decide that or see if anyone's interested in touring around. But I feel like across the whole valley, it'd be interesting to find our example of a really good functioning bit of stormwater infrastructure. Typically,
What do the blue dots
yeah.
represent?
So for anyone else that isn't here, we've our department's been out inventorying, public works assets. So we did some visits to the valley as well, just to collect information about signage. And these are stormwater culvert points, whether it's the inflow or the outlet. So we're trying to build a countywide information set. So we were in Kirkwood a couple days and did it here as well. So these are usually the points where, at least I think the map shows, where we've had an issue potentially. And if it's in East Meadows, stormwater culverts got blocked up by debris flows in this past summer and the summer before. And I don't think we're trying to really create a timeline of all the storm events that have happened in Kirkwood that have caused impacts, but usually when they do, they happen in these locations. So this, again, I think is open-ended discussion. I've had some inquiries to our department about, hey, can you help us identify who's responsible for the stormwater system, or what happens if we need to make a fix. And if we talk about a specific location, like what we know at the office now is the Grand Canyon, aka Kirkwood Towers Drive, where stormwater's impacting the road facility, yeah, we can get real detailed about who has an easement and what the improvements are there. But in general, I think the open-endedness of this discussion is some of these stormwater facilities are going to have this, at least I view in the last 3 years, we've had the same problems 3 years in a row with certain locations. So when we talk about fixing these, I think the county, at least for Alpine County, we're specifically involved because we're the first one that a contractor, an engineer is going to reach out to and say, hey, what do I need to do here? Help me out. And we're more than happy to provide some information. It's just that we don't have the responsibility for these facilities. So we kind of act just as a passive observer that can say, hey, I took photos of the stormwater system, but that's about as much as I can do. I want to just highlight a few things with the photos. It's just pictures I've taken in some trips to the valley, which are more focused on what I'm talking about, and that's the stormwater utility, the built environment that conveys the stormwater, and not as much construction stormwater or site stormwater management, which we have had some discussions about in the past. So let's just go real quickly here. This is right above the Expedition Lodge site. So I think this is just some overland flow that gets captured, and since Expedition was built, it's probably bent around Expedition. That this is October of 17. All this stormwater wound up in the Site 1 grindings remediation area, and as of this day, it washed away all of the chips and things that were put down. So the chips probably did a good job initially of keeping the rain right off the soil, but once all the stormwater from this drainage ended up there, it kind of washed out. And I think if any one picture kind of tells the story here, it's all of the infrastructure in Kirkwood intercepts stormwater because we basically have a bathtub ring of development around the meadow. The stormwater on the mountain is as it usually naturally is. You probably, and I don't feel like a site visit where we need to walk up to the highest access roads and look at the culverts, but it's mainly a natural condition with some intercepts, whether you've got a road up there, you've got some improvements. But as we get to the infrastructure, you just have, I think of as informal conveyance, right? Mm-hmm. This is not, this wasn't designed by an engineer. This isn't something we can look at our plans and go, oh yeah, the storm drainage 001A, it's this one here. But it has real big consequences down the line. And so this is where I think just talking about how to look at some of the areas where there are problems and just have a discussion about them. Again, I think this is coming off the mountain right up to KM Drive. And this one was a pretty well-known area right across from KCA Club where the conveyance at Kirkwood Meadows Drive got blocked up. Maybe it got blocked up 5 years ago. We don't know. But this has been an issue I think everyone's dealt with for the last 3 years, whether it was runoff in the spring or a storm event in the dry season. So each solution here may be pretty involved to fix this drainage, perhaps.
This one has been fixed.
I know that this one has been cleared out.
No, I mean, they really had a huge culvert
Okay.
last summer.
Yeah, KCA
Yeah.
did that last summer.
So yeah, there was an improvement project, I guess. And again, these are the kind of things that, for utility's sake in managing the stormwater, that KCA does their stuff, and over here this happens. But to kind of especially capture the way this is changing over time, I think is really difficult because every season some stuff gets maintained, other things are improved, and how would you know if you're not the resort, or how would you know if that's not your HOA? So again, this may look a lot different than it did, and I think these kind of photos are the ones that, for comparison, will have this situation, which was fixed. And then we could take a photo of another rain event this summer and say, hey, now it's functioning properly. Just as an example, especially a local one of how to do this, this is one of my favorites right next to Red Cliffs Housing, the Powerhouse Road. There's a drainage that daylights, but it's like almost completely underground, and it's conveying stormwater from somewhere, and then this runs down into the stuff from the photo from before. So is this on an engineer's plan sheet that I have at community development? I doubt it. And maybe it's lurking around here in the valley, but I've made this comment to folks that have talked to me about stormwater, which is, hey, even if we pulled that drawing out, what does it look like now? Because maybe some changes happened informally that aren't on as-built plans, and maybe maybe it's just maintenance that's been so deferred that it's changed significantly. Another one that we've dealt with, from our building official to the folks in our department at the Kirkwood, at the Meadows condominiums. This is just some drainage that's been affecting, or had gotten into the parking structure, and they had to make some improvements, and I think that turned into a project because we excavated, the Meadows excavated their foundation to seal it, and during the excavation they were disturbing stuff, and just was another project in Kirkwood that had to happen in late season, fall, to get done. So I wouldn't be able to 2 points to whoever can say where this is. Oh, I think this is Loop Road right in front of us. And I think this, again, just shows it's informal, roadside ditch drainage. It's not a designed swale. It's not something that you'd expect to see if it was built now, but that's what we have. And this is what we do have in some places that you'd expect to see now, and I think this is on Kirkwood Meadows Drive. And whether it is or it's not, I know that when the Timber Creek blowout happened, the drainage wound up on KM Drive. There was so much of it that it went down the road and then blocked up the next DI or culvert that looked like this. So, these things weren't designed to handle a big kind of catastrophic stormwater event, and that's what's been happening. And then we could have half a day of photos where someone that's staff, either at Alpine or Amador or citizens in Kirk community, go out to projects that are typically under construction and go, how's the stormwater BMPs doing? Sometimes they're good, a lot of times they're not, and even if they're installed properly, they've got a lot of work to do. So this is, 10 years ago from the Sentinels, and I think just kind of illustrates the difference between the temporary infrastructure to get a project done and get it to a final BMP state versus the stormwater that's conveying drainage around the roads and the buildings that either is deficient or it's not, but has been an issue just in the last couple of years where, at least this venue allows a bunch of different stakeholders to have a discussion, and I just thought, let's see if we got any more info about this topic, because when I think we wanted to go out and site visit we were talking specifically about Timber Creek and the stormwater event that happened there last winter. So at least a year ago, you could have gone out and seen all the damage, and I think that would have been a nice illustration. Now it's probably still got snow on it, so I don't think there's that need today. Just wanted to open that discussion up because when we do any other mitigation item, there's some things that probably need fixes, and we would expect if there's a parking lot improvement to come or something like that, then we'll get a big stormwater improvement, because the informal systems that we're going to go find out there now, like a Red Cliffs, will get upgraded. So it's just kind of a capture of what the existing conditions are here, why they're unique compared to other locations because of the history of development here, I think.
Yeah, that's good. Can I ask, is there a waste discharge permit or something that's issued to some entity in the valley that the water board oversees? I know there was the violation, but I think that was just a discharge. But is there some form of a NPDES or waste discharge permit that the resort has here? Do you know? With the water board?
I think the answer is no. All the stormwater here is too small to require like MS4.
Yeah.
And too bad Chuck's not here because I don't know about some of their agencies in Amador that may have them, like City of Jackson.
Yeah.
But I don't think any of that applies here.
We have several in the county, but typically they focus more on the urbanized areas, and so our portion, even of our Phase 2 permit with the Central Valley Water Board, doesn't really cover this portion of El Dorado County. So there really isn't that kind of oversight from the Water Board that has typically what's in a permit like that, which is kind of a quid pro quo where you get compliance safety as long as you're adhering to these conditions in your permit. And so as a result of that, it is much less formal. And I think that can be okay, but we have been seeing, I guess we really had some exceptional storms last fall too, because this was when you brought in some cobble, this big.
Yes.
It wasn't just, the storms weren't carrying silt and sediment, they were carrying, close to boulders because the intensities were so high. And I think, all the forecasting with climate change is that's going to be more of the norm. We're going to see higher intensity storms, maybe more rain hitting our mountains, and we see it in South Lake Tahoe too. The Truckee River peaked a couple weeks ago, higher than any time except 1996, which was our exceptional rain on snow event. So I think that's why, and we talk about this a lot at El Dorado County, where how can you start planning better for that eventual change in hydrology, because it's coming, but that doesn't mean that your budget is 20% higher to deal with it. And so we have the same problems. I think it's good to acknowledge it, and when replacements are planned and do go in to do any upsizing, knowing that that need's probably going to be there, I think is a good practice, and something that we're attempting to do now is kind of planning for the future. We don't have the hydrologic record to show what it's going to be like, but the forecasting does say it's going to be more intense. So, does anyone have public comment on this?
So this is a great map. It'd be great if Amador would actually do the same work on the other side.
Amador? Yeah, we can talk to Chuck. Do you know if they're doing asset management?
Yeah, I don't know if they have that data or not. We more likely is we would just do the same thing when we get more time to complete the work. For me, it's kind of it makes sense to have the same type of information here in Kirkwood for what we do. So,
Agreed. Yeah, I commend you for that effort. That's great.
And so, and probably since this is really a community-wide, valley-wide effort that we need to do here, I think the only entity so far that is addressing all this side is probably TC TAC, but that may be the driver of this process, because we need to have a coordinated effort for drainage. And it starts from the top of the mountain and it goes down to the valley. So, I mean, KMA is willing to work to improve drainage, but we need to be able to communicate with people downstream of us. Or, I mean, there needs to be a community-wide consultation, I think, on this issue.
Agreed. Yeah, that. I mean, have those communication? Are you feeling like there's a need for? Have you attempted to communicate and it's not been there, or?
Doug came to mention at one of our KMA board meetings that he wanted to have community joint program, and I think that would be a perfect prototype to actually move forward in that direction. Is actually, and I've been holding some road maintenance because I wanted to know what the drainage operation is going to be for KMD, and so we need to work together on that to make it efficient.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't. Obviously there's all these things that would be great to have, a master drainage study of the valley and asset inventory, and all these things cost money, and without a regulatory body saying thou shalt, and I don't really think that's within our wheelhouse, those things take time. So, I guess we can continue to encourage and coordination, and when failures occur and replacements happen, that they're done with upsizing in mind and appropriate BMPs and rock protection and all the things that would be expected. I think it is, to me it would be very important, if I was managing the resort responsibilities here, to know that the water board does have eyes on this valley because of the asphalt grinding violation that occurred, and knowing that you do want to try to stay ahead of that kind of thing. Because I'm sure water board folks are here skiing and see things. That's a lot of times how we've gotten in trouble in the past, is someone comes to use one of our facilities just on the weekend. Say they go to Apple Hill for us, and oh, by the way, I was in El Dorado County and I saw something. And that's how things happen, is that there's a lot of eyes out there in the world now, and just knowing that how sensitive it is here, a lot of environmental concern, the river right in the middle of the valley, that eyes are going to be out here. So I think this is a good one that we always continue to focus on. Was there another comment out there? Yeah,
I
Doug.
just wanted to say thanks for bringing this up. This is a hot topic, and I think it needs more discussion. However we end up doing that together as a community, because we are so linked. It's really hard because there's so many different entities with either different levels of dollars to spend on this type of thing, or different ideas on who's responsible for what, but it all affects everybody. And if one person's drainage is wrong, then another person might be paying for a new road.
Yeah.
So it's a big one, and I don't have a real clear vision of how we're going to fix it in the future, but I think it's great that we're having the conversation. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least we can facilitate from the, hey, I know that the last season had engineers out doing a survey of a particular location. It's just information like that which could be shared to say, KCA is hiring them to do this, but if you're another HOA, they're going to be in the valley, and are you interested in the same type of work? You guys organize the Epic Promise Days, which are a lot of times opportunities to do things like restorations and do work on the ground, and then suddenly, especially for here, that's like going to be the main effort for work like that, where a homeowners association may be glad to join in because you're going to be doing work in that, just in this topic. It doesn't really have to be backing out a culvert or something, but that everything between that range, and usually the middle is where we work, which is, hey, we'd like to fix that. What do we need to do? We can deal with that project by project, but this you'll find across the valley from one county to the next, or from one HOA to the next, the issues are almost identical. So I just felt like rather than get stuck on the storm drainage problem here, there, otherwhere in the valley, that we start talking about it at this scale. So,
Agreed. I think we'll continue it. Anything else on this one? On the phone, anything? Okay. I think let's move on. We did have an addendum to our agenda, so thanks for bearing with me on the multiple email submittals here. This is item G on our agenda. This was submitted on April 13th, 2018 by the applicant. And let me go ahead and just read item 6. This is a review and possible approval of color samples for a deck rebuild. See you, Andrew. The applicant is Mr. Hammond. Owners Peter and Johanna Decay. Address 50990 Winter Greenway, Lot 125, APN 029182009. As I understand it, the applicant did submit. Are you that?
Randy Hammond.
Oh, great. Thank you for coming. As I understand it, you did submit these samples previously and got them approved for siding?
Yes. Yeah, it was 2015.
2015. I'm sorry Chuck isn't here because he said he was going to bring
So
them.
this was, these are examples of what we did to the house. We resided the whole house, and these were the colors that we used and were approved by TriTech and KMA. And now we're coming back, and this deck is in disrepair, so we're
Okay.
rebuilding that deck as is.
Same footprint? Just
Same footprint. There's
material.
actually going to be a slight cantilever. We're at about 60 square feet.
Okay.
Just a little bit, but the same footprint. As far as the foundation, we're using existing piers, no excavation work. So basically, it's all the wood
Okay.
structures being replaced.
And you're going to build it with Trex in these colors? Is that the proposal?
Yeah, it's ASIC decking, and that was approved. I don't have a picture of it, that was on the front porch. And then this is a picture of the drift grade siding that was used, and that will be, the only place you'll actually see that is on this band here.
Okay.
These columns are going to be clad with Core 10 rusting steel.
Okay.
So, and the deck railing will be reused, but with new, with additional cross bracing for current code requirements of spacing on them.
Okay.
It used to
Right.
be 6 inches now.
Yeah,
it's 4
now it's 4. I know about that. How will this Core 10, is it bright and shiny as it is now and needs to oxidize?
Yeah, actually KMA mentioned that we'll treat it to facilitate it rusting faster.
I think that's important. I've seen, this is supposed to oxidize, and in our dry climates, it can take a long time.
This is
From what I've seen.
after about 18 months.
Oh wow, that's faster than what I've seen. So that's good. Okay.
it should be in the snow for half the year.
Yeah,
Buried.
But yeah,
Okay.
KMA PC already commented on that. So yeah, actually it's pretty simple to take out. hydrogen peroxide, vinegar, and salt.
Okay. And start accelerating that process. That would be my only comment. I think since TriTac already approved these colors, they certainly look like mountainous friendly colors to me.
Yeah.
So,
And this actually is probably not even visible with the scenic corridor.
What's the do you have views to the property from where primarily just in the neighborhood? Kind of
I don't understand.
like where would you be able to see like
Just hanging out.
specifically like the
The
deck?
meadow,
Okay.
if you were out in the meadow.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is a meadow lot, so yeah, it's a meadow behind the common land behind.
okay.
But there's some, I'm usually not used to looking at KMA from East Meadows, but along KMA there's a few other properties like this, just like the ones on East Meadows that are on the meadow.
Yeah.
They're more visible side to side, not from north
Right,
to
so
south.
this is at the very end of Winter Green.
Got it.
Okay.
Like if you went down Winter Green, you'd run right into this house.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I'm good with it too. I agree if you want to do the treatment, that's a good way to go.
I think
Never know,
so.
Next year you might not get those buried, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might not.
No, it's actually something simple to do, and if it makes everybody happy.
That would be my only recommendation. Other than that,
Okay,
I think we can approve it.
okay. Do you stamp? Do you still stamp?
That'll go through Chuck or whoever at Amador, whether they need to put a zoning approval or something.
Okay.
We don't, there may have been a stamp
There
at
was.
some point.
Was there? Yeah, I haven't seen the. We should get one.
I probably have it buried in our stuff.
Pull it out.
Yeah, there used to be stamp. That's okay. Yeah, because this is going to Amador, so.
It's got to go to Amador. But we'll note in the minutes it was approved, and you can use that
Just
for
to
that
get,
hearing.
Get that rolling for the approvals is, we'll get back to the office and email Chuck. We took action and here's the recommendation, then he's got something.
Can you CC me on that?
Sure.
Yeah, I have your email address.
Okay. Yeah, that way, because I'll probably submit Tuesday or Wednesday next week
Okay.
to Amador.
Yeah, that should
Okay.
be enough for them.
Yeah, I can email Chuck when I get back, and I'll CC you that we approve the action.
Be a trigger for Chuck to go find his stamp.
Go find your stamp, Chuck.
I probably am the one that has it. Yeah, so I'll move to recommend to Amador the deck materials and the recommendation for the accelerated rusting.
Absolutely. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, approved.
Thank you, guys.
You're all set. Thank you for coming.
You betcha. Have a good day.
You too. Anything else to discuss today? Okay, with that, and nothing else from you, Zach?
Nope.
I'm going to go ahead and adjourn today's meeting. It's 11:33. Thank you all for coming.